The pointer father was old as hell and got him a hold of that girl. Luckily, it worked out well. He was like, 17, you want to hand over to me, your daughter, and my name ain't R. Kelly? Okay. Show my ass this book, okay? Because I loves the way the Pointer Sisters dress. So if I don't have on one of my Renee scarves, okay, and this one, I think we got one more of this particular scarf left. We have some displays, scarf shades combo on sale now at uptopbeauty.com. So if you loving the look, you better run on over there and get to it before somebody else does. But child, I'm telling you, I'm going to be showing my ass this playlist. I done went on eBay and found me some church lady hats. They coming in the mail soon. Okay, I'm finna show my ass in this book. I can't even lie. Hello, love bugs. Hello, Bellas. If you have not already done so, please remember to like, share the Facebook, subscribe, and visit uptopbeauty.com for these Renee scarves. And if you are not already a part of this book club, please hit the Patreon link below and or the join button here on the YouTube. And for a small monthly fee of $5, you babies, yes, you can be privy to all the shenanigans before the YouTube gets it, if the YouTube gets it. Shenanigans meaning my trip back home, my employment journey. Y'all, I'm telling you, this job is burning my ass up. Do you know, on my first day, by 12 o'clock, I was like, I want a nap. I need a nap. It was rough. It was rough, okay? And day 2 is even rougher. So I'm doing these intros with me and you. Look. But the review is going to be audio because I just don't have time to do it in front of the camera. I just don't, y'all. When I get my schedule together and it's solid, I'll be able to get back in front of the camera like regularly for you guys. But as of right now, this job is kicking my ass. Now, let's begin reading about Miss Ruth Pointer's Still So Excited. You always look back, wondering how life could have played out differently. Growing up, our household was totally straight-laced and strictly run accordingly to religious values that allowed for little freedom or individuality. Maybe if my parents had embraced the notion that the quest for attainable perfection was impossible and that my childhood didn't have to be so rigid, I would have coped better. Maybe I would not have ended up pregnant, drunk, high, and alone back in the day. But those are big, hypothetical maybes. My parents were determined to protect us from what my dad called the devil's work. I instinctively rebelled, a trait that had followed me for a good portion of my adult life. I had been force-fed so much fire and brimstone and fear of eternal damnation that I was afraid every time I left the church that I might go to hell before Sunday dinner. Being forced to constantly strive for perfection through Christianity, that's just an unattainable goal. So pause right quick. You know what? I carried so much fear about hell. Like, the scariest thing in life to me is dying and sitting down there with the devil and having the devil do whatever it is he want to do to me. If you haven't read The Coldest Winter Ever Part 2, I recommend that you listen to our playlist for, what is it called? Life After Death by Sister Soldier. Exactly how she wrote that book is what I imagined hell to be. Coupled with the fact that I already have a passive kind of demeanor. I am a Libra. with being scared of hell, realized from reading all these books that really did play heavily on my behavior while maneuvering through this callous universe. I'm paying attention to that more now. I felt I could never measure up to my parents' expectations and that I was unworthy of God's unconditional love. I didn't realize that I didn't have to be a saint to merit that love. Lord knows I was no saint, but neither were my folks. Well, maybe my mother. They were both from the deep South. They met in Arkansas. My father, Elton, was a sweet-natured man with an obscure criminal past. Daddy was charismatic and handsome, a snazzy dresser who easily caught the attention of his congregation, especially the women. When I was a kid, we lived across the street from a community park in Oakland, California. So we heard a lot of harsh words. My dad kept a pair of binoculars near the window, and I remember from time to time seeing him use them to watch people at the park. My mother, Sarah Elizabeth Silas, was born in Roseboro, Arkansas in 1924 and later moved to Prescott, Arkansas. She grew up with 5 brothers and was the only girl. She became a minister at age 14 and never lived a secular life that involved dancing, partying, or wearing makeup. My mom was the polar opposite of my father. She was the disciplinarian of the household and at church, and didn't pull any punches when it came to what she wanted you to do. Don't forget, her father did have some kind of criminal activity in his past, but he don't like to talk about it. Most preachers do. Okay? But they don't like to talk about it. It was a time where he was in them streets, and the father had allowed his brother-in-law to wear his coat. When the brother-in-law went to the father's house to return the coat, they got his ass. Bop, bop, bop. Okay? Bip, 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 pop, 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 whatever. They got his ass. So the brother-in-law was murdered cold blood. And the father believed that murder was supposed to be for him and not his brother-in-law. Ever since that occurrence, he changed his life and became a minister. I can still recall her sitting in the choir stand or up at the pulpit if she was going to be speaking and looking down at me. Her expression said it all. You better straighten up, young lady, and start listening. That look absolutely terrified me. Mom was blunt and to the point, but she was also sweet. The congregation always looked forward to her taking the pulpit because they knew the service would end on time when that happened. I loved my mom, but she kept her distance in those days. As a teenager, I was much closer to my dad. Although he could be as unyielding and straight-laced as my mom, he was definitely more lenient. Daddy was working as a minister when he met my mom through her mother, Roxy Silas, who saw him preach the gospel at a traveling summer revival. The revivals back then were held inside a large white tent. Grandma Roxy seen Daddy Pointer. Excuse me, brother. Are you a single man? 'Cause I got a splendid daughter that may suit you just fine. You know the Pointer father was old as hell and got him a hold of that 17-year-old girl. Luckily, it worked out well, But anyway, he was like, 17, you want to hand over to me? Your 17-year-old daughter? And my name ain't R. Kelly? Okay. When Roxy got home from the revival where she first laid eyes on the handsome, imposing preacher man, she pulled my mother aside and declared, I met your husband today. As the saying goes, from her lips to God's ears. Whether she was actually obeying God or just her equally powerful mother, Mom went with the program, and she and Daddy were married on July 20th, 1941. To borrow another familiar expression, my 40-year-old daddy-to-be must have thought he died and gone to heaven. His bride was barely 17. My bad, she wasn't 17, she was 16. Now, I'm not going to bash him because that's nothing new. I'm not saying that it's okay to reach for a teenager and lock him up, but we all seen The Color Purple. We all saw how Mr. went round there to Nettie and Cilly's father and was like, I want your Nettie. And their father was like, oh, you can't have Nettie. You can have Cilly, though. She cooked real good. She spoiled twice. Despite the big age difference, their marriage worked. They were together for 38 years until Daddy's death in 1979. Mom told me later she wasn't in love with my dad when they married, but she was an obedient daughter and did what her mother told her. Eventually, she said she grew to love my daddy. They wasted no time starting a family. My eldest brother, Aaron, was born on April 19, 1942. Almost 9 months to the day my parents consummated their marriage. Brother Fritz followed in 1943. The same year, my parents pulled up stakes and moved to West Oakland, California. The Deep South had limited possibilities for African Americans then, and my parents didn't want their children to endure the harsh realities and extreme prejudices they had faced their whole lives. I'm sure that and the lure of a new adventure on the West Coast was all that was needed for them to accept an offer by a group of ship migrants to come up to California and build a place of worship from the ground up. The West Oakland Church of God. West Oakland was one of the first settlements in the area, and African Americans began pouring into it, mostly through the historic 16th Street Depot. Even in the Golden State, blacks couldn't live wherever they felt like it due to racially restrictive housing covenants. But West Oakland welcomed all newcomers. At the time, it was the largest African American community in Northern California, loaded with restaurants and jazz and blues clubs on what was known as the Chitlin Circuit. Aretha Franklin, Ella Fitzgerald, Etta James, Ray Charles, John Lee Hopper, Sammy Davis Jr., Muddy Waters, James Brown, and Ike and Tina Turner, where I first saw them, were regular performers there. Black-owned businesses such as flower shops, barbershops, grocery stores, and garages flourished, and pretty much everyone knew each other. Reminds me of Chocolate City. This right here, I don't know what you call this GC right now. That thing's so gentrified, I don't know where I am when I go home. The church raising at the corner of 10th and Myrtle was a community event with future congregants, mostly fellow immigrants from southern states, contributing sweat, equity, and labor to build a place for folks to gather and worship the same Heavenly Father. Once finished, it became a focal point for the neighborhood. For many, the church became an integral part of their everyday lives. It's no exaggeration to say that there was something going on there every single day that drew people in. And being the preacher's kid meant that the Pointer children were volunteered for every single activity the church sponsored. The choir, holiday plays, Bible study, Sunday school, vacation Bible school, revivals, picnics. It never let up. Once my parents got settled into their new home at 1176 18th Street, they started having kids again. I was born on March 19th, 1946 in Oakland, as were my three sisters. Anita in 1948, Bonnie in 1950, and June 3 years after that. Anita was the only one of us born at home. Our abode was quite humble given the amount of people who lived there. It was a 2-story duplex located in a working class neighborhood that was borderline ghetto. It couldn't have been any more than 1,000 square feet of living space. The Pointers occupied the upstairs, And the Silases, my mom's brother's family of 5, lived downstairs. My cousin Paul Silas, who later became a star professional basketball player and coach, lived there as well. My parents, my paternal grandfather, Herman, Papa, and the 6 Pointer kids all made do with their 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, and 1 bathroom. Bunk beds were a necessity, including a set for my brothers in the dining room, and quiet time simply didn't exist. So I'm going to say something that I find that African American cultures don't really do that often, but other races do, is they all buy a house together. They'll have a family at the top and at the bottom. They'll work hard, pay that house off, and then they'll buy the second home. The second home, everybody works together, pay the house off as soon as possible, then move on to the third home. I find that a lot of Asian families do that. Maybe that's something that we need to get back into. It's funny that I just believe that African Americans feel like they are raised to get their own, or their parents force them out of the house. But get the fuck out. I want my house to myself. That could be something. But a lot of families, a bunch of them live in that house. I mean, cramped up together. They pay that house off, and then they go on to buy the second house. Churchly Matters filled up my entire life back then. While I hardly ever studied my Sunday school lessons and usually showed up unprepared, I otherwise tried to do as I was told, dutifully participating in all church activities and contributing to my folks' ministry with as much enthusiasm as I could muster, which wasn't much, because we never seemed to get a break from it. Even when we weren't in church, religion was jammed down our throat. My problem was that I had a strong appetite and a desire to be adventurous and do a lot of things I saw my friends doing who didn't attend our church. I want to be free to tell it. Just say that you love